India, EU, and ASEAN partnership in this regard. Joining us are Valentina Superti, Director of DG Grow's Directorate for Ecosystems, Renu Pall, Additional Secretary, New Emerging and Strategic Technologies at the Ministry of External Affairs, and La Kuang La, Director, Market Integration Directorate, the ASEAN Secretariat. This session will be moderated by Rajeshwari Pillai Rajagopalan, Director, Center for Security, Strategy and Technology at the Observer Research Foundation.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session looking at the India-EU-ASEAN Indo-Pacific Cooperation on Digital Connectivity. I'm Raji Rajagopalan. I'm the Director of the Center for Security, Strategy and Technology at the Observer Research Foundation in New Delhi. Once again, thank you for joining us. Looking at this particular panel discussion, we will be looking at the enhancing digital connectivity in the Indo-Pacific, opportunities for India-EU, examining clearly the opportunities among the three partners, India, EU, and the Indo-Pacific. The last 2 years have seen enormous changes in our lives. One of the most transformative changes is in the area of digitalization of our societies. COVID-19 pandemic has pushed countries to embrace digital technologies at an accelerated pace. So proliferation of digital technology across the Indo-Pacific has become a reality, but there is also uneven development of technology. There are critical technologies such as cybersecurity, digitalization, cyber resilience, artificial intelligence have been accelerated across the region, and we need to be ready to use them in a manner maximizing options and choices while minimizing the vulnerabilities. So these present significant opportunities for people, businesses, and the broader economy. But endeavor in this regard must be guided by international standards so that we are able to use this without presenting ourselves to risk to security or prosperity. And together, India, EU, and the Indo-Pacific region can help shape a global technology environment that meets our shared vision of an open, free, rules-based Indo-Pacific region. We all have a vision and goals enshrined in various documents and statements like ASEAN Outlook for the Indo-Pacific or the EU's Indo-Pacific strategy for a free and open Indo-Pacific. There is also another important major imperative that both India and the EU have worked with many Indo-Pacific countries in the area of cyber and critical technologies, and the pandemic has pushed our efforts in this regard. But the region, I believe, is still faced with the dual transformation challenge: how to stimulate further digital development while ensuring that future growth is sufficiently inclusive and that we don't leave behind anyone, so that there is an even and balanced development. As a result, how the Indo-Pacific brings to bear its collective strength and forges new partnerships to capitalize on technology while also managing the risk will determine the shape of the digital transformation and in turn the digital economy. So the idea in this panel is to see how the European Union and India can establish mutually beneficial relationship, promote investments, facilitate cooperative exchanges in the Indo-Pacific, which is home to a vibrant digital ecosystem. So the next 45 minutes, we will explore tangible steps to build such partnerships, enhancing sustainable and secure digital connections that support resilient digital economy in the Indo-Pacific. To talk about these issues and see how we can get going on the Indo-Pacific digitalization process and running with a new sense of purpose in the context of the pandemic and the urgency to enhance digital connectivity in the Indo-Pacific, We have a terrific panel of experts, of speakers. Ms. Valentina Superti, who's the director of the DG Growth Directorate of Ecosystem. Ms. Renu Pall, Additional Secretary, New Emerging and Strategic Technologies, Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India. Mr. Liu Quang Lan, Director, Market Integration Directorate at the ASEAN Secretariat. I will introduce each one of them as their turn comes up. First, let me turn the screen to Ms. Valentina Superti. Ms. Valentina Superti is a director, like I said, in DG Grow. She's responsible for the policies on tourism, textiles, social economy, and the digitalization of industry. Previously, she was Resources Director from 2015 to March 2021, and the Director responsible for the single market for the goods from 2014 to 2015. Her previous responsibilities included serving as Deputy Head of Cabinet of European Commission Vice President Antonio Tajani, in charge of industry, SMEs, Galileo and Copernicus from 2011 and to 2014. She has an extensive biography, but I'm just going to stop in the interest of time. So let me now turn the screen to Ms. Valentina Superti. Over to you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the very nice introduction. That makes me feel somehow old, but at the same time, yeah, it's absolutely correct. Thank you so much, and good afternoon to all of you. And thank you for the opportunity to try to explain what is the the importance of the Indo-Pacific region for the European Union as a whole, because that's the starting point. It's a very important policy for us, a strand of policy for us, to have good relationships with the Indo-Pacific region. And why is it so? I would say that the European Union and the Indo-Pacific are natural partners, notably if we think of investment and trade. And the trade exchange between the two regions are higher than between any other geographical regions in the world. And if we go back to 2019, so pre-COVID, the annual trade reached 1.5 trillion euros. So that's a very big amount. And moreover, the European Union is the top investor and leading provider of development cooperation in the Indo-Pacific. And this is the background of a strategy that was adopted by the European Union earlier this year on 14th of September. And it's the EU strategy for cooperation in the Indo-Pacific. And what is our objective is a deepening and diversification of trade and investment ties and collaboration to help accelerate the just, as you mentioned, the green and the digital transitions. And the strategy puts a special emphasis on the digital and connectivity partnerships in light of another important policy document, a European policy document, which is the Digital Compass. Now, what are the main achievements of cooperation between the European Union and ASEAN countries in particular? First of all, you will remember that the two areas of the world agreed to upgrade the ties to a strategic partnership already in December 2020. And then in April 2021, the European Union member states renewed their full commitment to the Indo-Pacific region. And in addition, the Digital Compass policy document that I just mentioned, there we have outlined specific targets to achieve the digital transformation by 2030. And included in those targets, very importantly, there is the European Union's commitment to step up the implementation of the European Union Asia connectivity strategy, through new connectivity partnerships with India and with the whole ASEAN region. And significant steps have been taken by the European Union to enhance broad technological cooperation with ASEAN, particularly to converge on important things that are the regulatory issues and standards. And in that way, provide open, safe, and inclusive digital domain that benefits citizens and businesses in both regions. And also the digital partnership I want to mention between the EU, the European Union, and India was strengthened in May 2021 with an agreement to deepen cooperation on emerging technologies, which is also, I think, a very clear example of the European Union's willingness to cooperate with such an important partner. And just let me conclude by highlighting the fact that digital issues are very high on the European Union's agenda. I'm sure you know that. I want to state it again. 20% of all the European budget, including the new, quite innovative so-called recovery and resilience facility plans. So all that money, it's trillion money that will have to go 20% to digital issues. So that's an important, that's an important part of the budget which will be devoted to digital. And also we are working on helping industry in securing better access to key products where supply chain disruptions can compromise its digitalization. Let me mention semiconductors and electronics in particular. So I will leave it there, and I very happy to listen carefully to all of you and then to exchange later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Supuri. I think this was superb in a sense. You brought out the European priorities in terms of digitalization and what you do within the EU, but also highlighting some of the things that you have been doing with India and the broader Indo-Pacific region. And some of the key words that ring to me in your concluding thing is about the supply chain resilience and the semiconductor industry, which are key in this process. Anyway, I'm sure we'll come back to you with a lot of questions, including from the audience. But let me now turn to our second speaker, Ms. Renu Pall. She's the Additional Secretary for New Emerging and Strategic Technologies at the Ministry of External Affairs. She has also represented India as ambassador to Austria and Montenegro. She's been the permanent representative of India to over 9 international organizations, including UNIDO, UNODC, UN COPWAS, UN CITRAL, OPEC, and so on and so forth. She was governor for India to the IEA board in 2017-19. Her previous assignments included in Moscow, Paris, Washington, DC, and Berlin, and of course, headed the joint secretary as a joint secretary in Americas division, Indonesian region, and so on and so forth. So again, she comes with a terrific bio, and I'm not going to, in the interest of time, I'm going to stop here, but hand the screen over to you. Over to you, Renu.
Thank you, Rajeshwari. I must correct you. I was never the Joint Secretary Americas, fortunately or unfortunately. But to come to what I was wanting to begin with, I wanted to make some 7 quick points about the raison d'etre for this partnership, EU, ASEAN, India. One, emphasizing that technology and connectivity are 2 essential pillars for all the 3 vis-a-vis the Indo-Pacific. India has an Act East policy, an IOR focus, SAGAR, and also an Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative, which was launched by the Prime Minister in November of 2019. The EU, as Valentina said, has an Indo-Pacific strategy, and its implementation is one of the priorities, I understand, for the incoming French presidency of the EU. ASEAN, I'm sure my colleague from the ASEAN will talk about it, has a well-defined ecosystem already in terms of engagement and documents for digital connectivity intra-ASEAN, but they do have challenges in terms of national policies and capacities which are to be addressed. The second point I would make is that digitization is a very powerful medium. It is an enabler that is set to become all-pervasive. Technology design and usability has been now simplified to an extent that the user no longer needs formal education to be able to use technology applications, especially in the financial field. And we are seeing this in India every day. New citizen engagement digital platforms that can also be secure are becoming essential for democracies and for more efficient governance. Again, this is the Indian experience, and this is the third point I wanted to make. The fourth is that all these technologies are crucial for youth, for women empowerment, for creation of jobs, and for economic revival in a post-COVID scenario. The Indo-Pacific, and that's the fifth point, is going to be one of the largest and fastest growing markets for digital products and services. Sixth point, digital technologies and the digital world are already a part of the future of geopolitics. There is a global context, there's a multilateral dimension, and also a very strong plurilateral context that has emerged in the last few years. The seventh and the last point is that these digital technologies and networks also need to be made immune from threats to national and international security and data misuse. We need the same yardstick of accountability and transparency on their use in developing countries as we are seeing in the developed countries, for both the big tech companies and the concerned governments. And this process has to be participative. More important, the core has to be human-centric. Let me come to the tangible steps for enhancing digital connectivity in the Indo-Pacific. I believe that India, EU, and the ASEAN need to look at four primary areas. The building up of digital infrastructure is a utility that is meant for the citizen. We have some of it under our Digital India programs. The second is building capacity and skills in the Indo-Pacific. The third, creating supportive digital and data governance frameworks and regulation, which has been discussed already in many sessions of GTS this time and the last year. And the fourth, that we need to develop synergies and complementarities between ourselves to build supply chain resilience. Out of this, the first requirement is to build up the digital infrastructure to bring depth and sophistication to the digital connects in the Indo-Pacific. This could be through effective and early rollout of secure digital technology for development, for rural development, for healthcare, distance learning, remote broadband connectivity, critical communications through fiber optics and use of satellite systems and undersea cables, deep sea technologies, etc. Because this is a maritime area that we're talking about. One of the most topical steps, however, would be to increase fintech absorption. India, EU, and ASEAN can also begin to use at-scale solutions from one country to another. We all have such solutions. For instance, India has a number of certified at-scale solutions under the Digital India program using the India Stack framework. Tools like UPI and RuPay, UID, Aadhaar, eKYC, eSign, DigiLocker, direct benefit transfer, agri-market app, crop insurance mobile app, BHIM, MyGov, PM Swanidhi, CoWIN, etc., can all be tweaked for other countries in the Indo-Pacific. The post-COVID scenario is expected to increase the need for cloud computing infrastructure, which in turn will demand data centers and a new skilled workforce. The Indo-Pacific region could well become a global node as a cost-effective and trusted data center hub. The second requirement is of training and building capacities in digital skills, another step we can take collectively. Digital literacy and education so that citizens can be participative in a digital economy. Digital innovation hubs, technology-free zones, etc., would be interesting to explore for India, EU, ASEAN. Centers of excellence for English language, for instance, which we have had with ASEAN, could now become centers of excellence for training in AI, ML, blockchain, data analysis, etc. We already have centers of excellence in software development and training in Cambodia, Laos, PDR, and Myanmar. And I understand we will have one in Vietnam up and running soon. The Indo-Pacific will also need digital capacities built up for law enforcement, crime investigation, crime prosecution, etc., for the digital space. Cybersecurity will need to see more collaborative effort in the Indo-Pacific. The third and the last aspect I want to highlight briefly is the creation of supportive digital or data governance frameworks and regulations. We in India need to get our thinking into law domestically on data security, data sharing, data storage, privacy issues, and keep a larger regional and global perspective in mind as we do so. EU's GDPR is a benchmark document, but only in some ways. The Indo-Pacific has trends ranging from selective localization in some countries to fragmented data governance in others to open data ecosystems in some. Digital trade and market trends are seen as going against the nationalization of data, but undeniably, there are privacy concerns and issues about use and misuse of data. I actually like the phrase I heard yesterday by Michael Nelson in an earlier session, that data be looked at as a data sphere. And we will have to recognize at some point, I think, that data is not coterminous with cyberspace. It is actually much more. To my mind, it is important that governance of digital data remain human-centric and benefit the people. But there is also undeniably a need for balance between privacy, market orientations, and national security objectives in the use and access to data. And that can only be done if we stop looking at data like the new oil or as merely a commodity for specific ownership, and instead look at it like oxygen in the atmosphere, which you can pollute to your own harm, but cannot altogether deny to anyone, and which is essential for all. Most importantly, to the individual whose data is the microcosm building block. So of course, data and its access and use requires regulation, but how and to what extent should it be regulated? And with what primary focus are the questions which we need to answer? I think I'll stop here for now.
Thank you, Ms. Pall, and that I think again a very comprehensive take on it. And I think I like your comparison as to how data should not be securitized or compared to the oil kind of analogy, and look at this more as a oxygen thing that cannot be denied. So essentially, we are looking at how data can be given to everybody, and nobody is left behind in the whole development and digitalization process. Once again, we will come back to you with more questions after our last presentation. Now, let me turn to our last speaker, Mr. Lei Kwang Lan, who is the Director for Market Integration Directorate at the ASEAN Secretariat. He graduated as an economist in National University of Economics in Vietnam in 1995 and earned a doctorate degree in economics from National Trade Institute in Vietnam in 2003. He has obtained his Master of Law in George Mason University in Antitrust Law and Economics in Virginia. Again, has a long professional career as a senior and chief trade negotiator for a number of free trade agreements, Director General, Deputy Permanent Representative of Vietnam to the WTO, and so on. I think, again, an extensive CV that I see here. But without further ado, let me welcome Mr. Lan to speak. Over to you. The screen is yours.
Thank you very much for your very kind introduction. Similarly, that I was a bit overwhelmed. First, I thank for the opportunity for the ASEAN Secretariat representative to share our perspective on how to enhance the digital connectivity in the Indo-Pacific platform and the opportunity for India, EU, and ASEAN. As many speakers have already mentioned, that the digital transformation have a profound impact on how the governments, how the business behavior, how the consumers behavior, how the government regulate digital developments. And also the COVID-19 really reinforced the clue that going digital is the key to survival and thriving in a changing business context. Now, in ASEAN, the digital transformations accelerate sharply and unleash a huge potential for the economic growth. So, according to the recent study by Bain and Google, the internet, the digital economy of ASEAN hit $170 billion in 2021 and poised to grow to over $360 billion by 2025. So this number outpaced all earlier projections in the report of Google and Bain. So really capturing this momentum, in 2021, ASEAN has identified digital transformations is the key priority for our cooperations to spur its economic growth and the ASEAN integration process. There are three key documents that I need to highlight for your information that really shape up the future of the digital transformation of ASEAN in the next 5 years. First is ASEAN Digital Master Plan 2025, highlight the vision to build ASEAN as the leading digital community and economic bloc empowered by secure, transformative digital service technology ecosystem. The second document is the work plan on the implementation of the ASEAN Agreement on e-commerce, which establishes the coherent regulatory framework for the ASEAN digital economy in the future. And the third one is Unnecessary Begawan Roadmap, or in short, BSBR, that provide a very strong commitment to establish ASEAN digital economy by 2025. So that clearly demonstrates that ASEAN really moved away from the traditional silo approach and adopt a holistic and coordinated strategy in our effort to really unleash the potential of the ASEAN digital economy in 2025. Now, how the digital connectivity contribute to the ASEAN, EU, and India? So in the last decade, ASEAN is firmly on its track to establish the economic community featured by stronger institutions, physical infrastructure connectivity, free movement of trade, investment, and labor. So the digital connectivity plays an increasing role in contributing to the success of the ASEAN integration strategy. The digital connectivity obviously gives a rise to innovation, new services, products, and tightening up the ASEAN connection with the key players like EU, India, China, Japan, Korea. Now, the digital connectivity between ASEAN and EU and India hold key to unlock potential for trade and investment between and among us. So some of you has know very well that EU is our second largest trading partner and the second largest FDI or investment inflow of ASEAN. And meanwhile, India is also enjoying a very good relationship with ASEAN, and India is the sixth largest trading partner and the seventh largest source of FDI in 2020. Now, against this landscape, let me emphasize on some of the area of potential cooperation. But I'm very glad that what I am going to say is very much in line with Madame Renu have already mentioned. First, we need to reinforce the regional supply chain with resilience to digital trade and e-commerce, which is really a promising area to boost the cross-border trade between ASEAN, India, and EU. And this area of cooperation does not only connect ASEAN with EU and digital, but also pave the way to establish a broader network of end-to-end digital platform and minimize paperless transaction, and using EU and India expertise and experience in this area. The second, we believe that India and EU can support ASEAN in addressing the digital connectivity infrastructure gap by fostering the ability of ASEAN to adopt advanced and interoperable digital solution and technology. And third, EU, ASEAN, and India should prioritize our technical cooperation to bridge the digital divide. We persistently prevent a lot of people, small and medium-sized enterprises, from accessing the digital technology. And also we consider that EU and India can offer a really good solution, expertise, and resource for human capacity building. And fourth, of course, not the least, is that the party or three parties should continue to work out a project that align with ASEAN digital connectivity agenda in the area of data governance, interoperable standard, cybersecurity, electronic payment, green technology, and digital inclusion. So in closing my remarks, so I would like to say that ASEAN is ready to collaborate with EU and India, the EU Digital Compass and 2030, and an Indian national strategy for digital transformation continue inspiring ASEAN in promoting our digital transformation. There are a lot of synergy between three of us to advance the digital transformation agenda. So ASEAN Secretariat, we are willing to facilitate the collaboration between ASEAN, EU, and India. With that, I stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lan. I think this has been, again, terrific. And I do see a lot of complementarities and similar themes in terms of how you have raised supply chain issues, digitalization, people, so that development reaches everybody and so on and so forth. But given that we have about 10 minutes, I'm going to straight away jump into the Q&A. I've got some questions from the audience, so I'm going to collect that and maybe add one of my own question to this in a sense. So one of the questions from the audience for Valentina is digital connectivity will become more complicated due to the advent of technologies like Internet of Things, IoT. What can be done to educate users about the implication of such connectivity when it comes to issues like privacy? So the whole question of balancing privacy with the connectivity and so on and so forth. So that's for Ms. Valentina. For Ms. Renu, I think the question is, what's the biggest opportunity for India when it comes to digital connectivity? Would enhanced connectivity possibly help in exporting native success like UPI? And you talked about the India stack, and I think that's a really good example to kind of take it to other regions. And so your response in that regard would be really good. And the last question for Mr. Lan is, how can the ASEAN region overcome regional barriers and achieve a single digital market in ASEAN along the lines of the EU? And my own question is in terms of, we have been looking at India-ASEAN, India-EU, India-EU-ASEAN kind of collaboration in different formats, different ways. But at the same time, what are the kind of hurdles or what are the kind of impediments that have come in the way so far in materializing? Or is it that the COVID has now become such an important imperative for us to push this digitalization and digital cooperation among the three important partners in a sense? So let me go back to the same order. Over to you, Supati. Supati, over to you.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I think it's clear that digitalizing further in its various dimensions is not an option, it's a must. And it's also clear that this is the agenda for the European Union, for its area, but clearly this has to be a wider agenda, meaning to the extent possible a shared agenda with other parts of the world, and you, ASEAN, India are clearly crucial partners in that respect. Amongst the various lessons of the COVID, there is also the clear now acknowledgement that we are all interconnected indeed. I have heard so much, from you also, including in terms of supply chain disruptions, for example. So now coming to our own agenda, I am really amazed actually how much convergence there is in terms of themes to be addressed and to be looked at between our own own European agenda and what I heard from the other panelists now. So we have, just to mention quickly, a few main points, let's say. One is skills. Clearly we will not go there, with our ambitious digitalization targets if we don't have the people who can do that. So that's one. Secondly, it's the digital infrastructure that was mentioned as well. And it's our ambition in Europe to have gigabyte connectivity and uninterrupted 5G coverage for all populated areas in Europe. That's another example. And the third one is it's the famous question of the cutting edge semiconductors. So as you may know, the European Union is aiming to double its share in global production by 2030. And in the field of data, which was also mentioned, data, edge, and cloud, we would like to have 10,000 climate neutral, highly secure edge nodes. Now, at the same time, we are also working on a data act, so on a framework, a legal framework for sharing data. Along the lines, I liked very much the image of the oxygen, so I will reuse it because it's indeed that. It's about, or also we were thinking it is something like the commons, the commons age in the Middle Ages. So it's a sharing, it's a sharing value concept that we are working on. Let me mention, last but not least, the public services in Europe should be fully digitalized by 2030. Now, the question, your specific question, how to frame all these clear ambitions against the need, of privacy, of keeping, of being mindful of people's right in a way to privacy. In general, I can say that we are trying to keep consistently a human-centric approach when devising all these policies and regulations. And also, you may know that, you know for sure that in Europe we have a quite advanced, I think, fair to say, a data protection regulation, which is applicable all over Europe. And of course, any type of legislation and of policy in Europe has to be compatible with the data protection regulation. So there is a clear legal framework that will guide us in this endeavor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Renu.
Yeah, I have already spoken about the India stack, as you said. So in the interest of time, I won't repeat that. But I would say that the biggest opportunity for India actually is the nature of the ASEAN-India relationship. As Director Lan said, it's like there's a lot of consultation in this strategic partnership. There's as much of listening as of talking between the partners. And we need to do that when we look at why digital solutions are doing well in India and how can they be, let's say, extrapolated to ASEAN. They need to be oriented to domestic requirements. There will be differences in socio-economic compulsions which need to be taken into account, differences in technology capabilities and capacities, and also differences in perspective to some extent over security or privacy or civil liberties. So it has to be a consultative dialogue on that. On your question, Rajeshwari, the global, the impediments, I would say that, the impediments, I mean, the convictions and the belief systems are absolutely right between these three partners. And yet we haven't seen the on-field kind of collaboration on the scale that we need to. So definitely we need to have a more delivery-oriented, I would say a structured dialogue between India, EU, ASEAN to develop a common view on the norms, standards, and guidelines for digital and emerging technologies. And I would say not just digital, but also emerging technologies, because, you know, in applications, the lines become very ambiguous. This, of course, has to be in line with democratic principles and the goal of inclusive and incremental growth. And I mentioned the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative, which the Prime Minister had launched in November 2019, because that has the concepts which can be looked at to make systems interoperable. The biggest challenge to digital connectivity is no doubt cross-border interoperability, and we need to work this out. Undeniably, also cybersecurity, information security, all security aspects will have a strong local orientation. Global meets local is not an easy process. It takes time and effort. Governments will naturally need to strike a balance between what they need to do, between privacy and fundamental rights of the individuals on one hand, between the commercial market interests and their growth aspirations as economies on the other, and also the various integration processes that they are into with various other partners, and yet safeguard their own legitimate security concerns. The exercise can be healthier if we can have some amount of brainstorming with academia, with private sector, and of course, big data companies, and also civil society. Industry, I feel, needs to come in more actively on defining the removal of these constraints. The scientists and the developers of emerging technologies in digitalization need to take on a more assertive role in how they're defining their innovations and the use of data. There's a strong role for technocrats in the use of emerging technologies. And ultimately, of course, the challenge of all this global versus local in the digital and emerging technology domain will need to be reconciled through diplomacy to balance the geostrategic and geoeconomic interests with national security concerns. But diplomats will also need to develop requisite skills, to have a fresh mind on these subjects. There's no precedence to fall back on. And the most important thing is that resource allocation for these digital corridors in the Indo-Pacific. And there will therefore need to be greater involvement of industry, especially Indian industry, from the Indian perspective. I'm sure so also for European and ASEAN industry in the financing and creation of digital assets.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Renu. Over to you for the final words from you, Mr. Lan.
Thank you very much. I think I have 3 points to share with the audience. First, I lastly agree with what has been said with my fellow panelists, because I think that we share a lot of things in common. So now the biggest barriers of ASEAN, or maybe the impediment that ASEAN is now facing, that prevent ASEAN from moving fast in the digital transformation and in the connection with, let's say, with big players like EU or India, is that ASEAN is not a homogeneous market, and we have a very diverse level of development. Some country very much advanced, and some other country is still in a less developed level. So that is why we have a lot of things to deal with. So, and of course, there's no solution that can help to address everything in just one point in time. So that is why ASEAN is moving, even though we try to move fast, but we know that it may need a lot of time and resource to do that, but both regional level and national level. So the second point is that no matter how different we are within the ASEAN, we all ASEAN share the same principle and the same value in pursuing the digital transformation. And some of you already called it the human-centric approach. I think ASEAN share the same value. We all share the same value. We call it the inclusive process, when where no one should be left behind. So that is why our key priority is trying to address the digital divide among ASEAN member countries and different actors in the market. We need to give them the opportunity to fully participate in the digitalization process. The third point is that, all right, this is a principle, but ASEAN forgot on 4 common strategy. One, I think, is the common standard. So ASEAN is now aiming to reach, to have a common interoperable standard that can be adopted throughout the country, across the border, and based on the best practices. For example, EU and India could be a really good source for the standard. The second, we want to really try to have a common harmonized regulatory framework in digital transformation. So we are talking about the UC model law, which could be really the common goal that we need to establish so that we can have a truly harmonized or highly interconnected ASEAN economy. The third one is the common data governance. Some of you already mentioned that we have a very different level of, a different type of regulatory in data governance. But ASEAN is aiming to have a common one. And EU is really one of our inspiring modality to associate with. So that, and lastly, we have a common strategy on cybersecurity. And ASEAN recently adopted the regional-wide action plan on cybersecurity in order to adopt the same principle, the same approach to deal with cybersecurity and to build up a trustworthy cyberspace. So that, based on for that common approach, we believe that ASEAN can go hand in hand toward the common digital economy of the region. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And I just could not stop, even though I'm completely out of time and the organizers have been telling me that we are running out of time. So I'm not going to try and sum up this session in any manner, but thank you all for, this has been a terrific conversation. Thank you all for your sharing your experiences and inputs in how we can strengthen the collaboration between the 3 key partners, India, European Union, and ASEAN. A hand of applause to everybody. And thank you all for joining us in this panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.